Margadonne with a little bit of Leicester. Tonight, my special guest is Jim Hurley, Chief of Police of Leicester, and we're going to be going over the license process, personal protection permits, and what it means to carry. Jim, how are you tonight?
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me.
So, what do we have going on that you feel is relevant tonight?
Well, let's jump right in and talk about the whole entire firearms licensing process, not only here in Leicester, but how some of it is universal across the state and how some of it isn't. But I think it's important to let our residents know, prior to starting, something about licensing here in Leicester and how Jim Hurley, as the police chief, handles it. Having a license to carry, possessing a firearm, is a constitutional right. And I never in my wildest dreams, when I started in police work, back when I was 18 years old, thought that I would be making a decision on whether somebody can exercise one of their constitutional rights. So 225 years later, after the Second Amendment and the Constitution was signed, Jim Hurley now has to make this decision. So I want our residents to know I take that decision very seriously. On top of that, I'm a person that believes in due process, and we'll get into how that plays a role in my decision-making when I'm reviewing a license to carry. And I think the other thing that's very important to let individuals know is, regardless of what my own personal opinions are, those don't play a role in this process. As the police chief, I'm here to enforce the law and make decisions that comply with the law. It has nothing to do about my personal opinion, doesn't allow me to delve into that, and I stick within the law very, very carefully. I'm very cognizant of that. And then finally, one of the questions that I'm frequently asked is, Chief, what's your standard for issuing a permit? And it's a very simple policy. My name is on the back of that license to carry that I issue to residents of Leicester. And I have to be able to go home at night, put my head down on a pillow, and be able to go to sleep without worrying about someone who has one of my permits. And I can't say it any easier than that. And the last thing is, we're going to talk about a lot of things. I'm not an expert. I do this every day, but it's a very complex law. I keep this wonderful guide that they give me that's several hundred pages right on my desk to review.
Yep.
And sometimes there are questions I don't know the answer to, and I reach out to experts.
And you did bring up your guide. I'm looking at your guide, and I have a traveler's guide that a friend of mine gave me for all 50 states. My little Massachusetts section is, I think, 3.5 paragraphs. But I do urge people to check with their states. If they have this traveler's guide, it changes frequently, as your guide must change.
It does, and we're very, very fortunate that we have the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association that stays up on top of this. But one of the things I encourage people to do is, especially when they come in and there's an issue with their permit or they don't, I do have to deny people. And one of the things I tell them is, you have the right to appeal, and the appeal process is never personal to me. If you appeal to court and you win, I'll give you a ride home. It's not like that. But there's another great organization out there. There are a couple of great organizations out there. There's GOAL, the Gun Owners Action League. They're right over in Northborough. I encourage people, sometimes there are problems with their license. Contact GOAL, see if they know another mechanism that might be out there that can help you work around that problem. And you always have the National Rifle Association.
Well, you and I had discussed previously about one that always bothered me. You told me the law had changed. If a person gets stopped for a DUI, drunken driving, it was considered a felony, a low-class felony, but a felony, and they couldn't apply for a pistol permit or right to carry. But you're telling me that law has changed to a point there's only a certain time span that applies?
Well, it has changed, but the important term in that law is a conviction. So when somebody is stopped for a first offense driving under, the normal outcome of a trial or a court proceeding on that is you get a continuance without a finding, you have to go and attend the alcohol awareness program, and then your case is dismissed. Once you start to get your second and third offense, they start giving you convictions. If you have that conviction and it's post-1994 forward, that can be a statutory disqualifier, and you could be banned from getting a license to carry.
Would that be one of the instances where I could appeal it, or no?
Well, why don't we run through the
Yes.
whole process and how a permit goes, and then we'll get right into the appeals, because I think that's very pertinent for people to understand. So how do you get a license in Leicester? And there's going to be a slide coming up on the screen. It's going to show you the standardized statewide application that you have to fill out. You simply answer the questions. But I just caution everybody, we get a lot of applications that come in, and there's a question on there. Have you ever appeared in court, criminal court? Doesn't say convicted, it says appeared. If you've appeared, please put it in there. It's a criminal offense if you turn it in with the wrong answer. We do understand the common sense rule that mistakes are made, and we try and be fair about that. So you fill out the application. If you're a first-time licensee applicant, you have to take the firearms safety course. You can get that at a number of different locations. We even host one here once a month at the Leicester Police Department. I have a copy of one of the announcements that they'll be putting up on the screen so you can see it, and that's $45, and Sergeant Jeff Tebow teaches that class. It's 4 hours long. When you've done that, you bring your completed application to the Leicester Police Department, have a pre-scheduled appointment. You come in and you see Sergeant Tebow, and he processes you, gets your application into the system, we call it MERCS, and then he takes your fingerprints. That then triggers all the background checks. So you're going to have a check done in what we call the Interstate Crime Index. That means all the states, and I believe there are 39 that dump records into this database, we're going to check those. So what happened in Vegas may not necessarily stay in Vegas. It may come back if you have an out-of-state record. We're going to find it. We also check what we call the Board of Probation. That's the Massachusetts database. Massachusetts Department of Mental Health gives us a background check to see whether there have been any mental health institutionalizations for an individual. Those all come back. Now we get to decision time. So Sergeant Tebow will bring all that information, and he'll sit down in my office and say, I have an applicant who has 4 entries on their criminal record, 2 of which are convictions, none of which are statutory disqualifiers. Okay, that's good. So we have a 2-pronged test. You have to be statutorily qualified, and then you have to be a suitable person. So you've already passed the first test. You have no statutory disqualifiers, and I believe there are 29 of them, or in that area. So then what I have to do is I have to look at and see whether you're a suitable person. So if you have four charges on your record, 2 are for unregistered vehicles, and 2 are for not having a license in possession, that's not a big deal. That's a no-brainer. Common sense rule, the application goes out. But then we start to get into people that have had house breaks, that they've been involved in, a malicious destruction of property, anything like that. Then I have to make a decision whether you're suitable. So what I do is I go out and I get the police reports and I read them. Now, it'd be very, very easy for me to read a police report from another department and say, holy cow, do you see what happened here? Unsuitable, see you later. But as I said earlier, I believe in due process. So when I read these reports and I say, oh, this doesn't sound too good, I send the applicant a letter, come in and meet with me. Tell me your side of the story. Because we all know there's 2 sides to some stories, sometimes there's 3. Mm-hmm. They come in and they meet with me, I have a hearing, and then I determine whether they're a suitable person. If they pass the tests, they're determined to be suitable and not statutorily disqualified, they get their permit. If I have to deny them for a statutory violation where I can't give them the permit, then they can appeal that to the court, but that's pretty clear cut. I'm going to have a certified copy of your conviction stamped by the court, and I'm going to hand it to the judge at the appeal hearing. Really very little chance of prevailing on that, in my opinion, but it's an avenue available to them.
It's their right to appeal it.
On a suitability issue, if I say, I don't think you're a suitable person, you can absolutely positively march yourself down to the East Brookfield District Court and take an appeal. The judge will give you a hearing, and we have to go in. You can bring an attorney. I go in, I do them pro se. I believe that I made the decision. I'm going to stand behind what I did, and I don't need a lawyer to hide behind. I go in, I'm going to tell my story. The judge agrees with me. You don't get your license. If he agrees with you, you get your license. I'll give it to you. And as I said, I'll even give you a ride home. That's for license to carry. If I deem you not to be suitable on an FID card, I have to petition the court and ask for the hearing. So it falls upon me. That's new under the law. So that's it really in a nutshell.
So-
Sounds kind of complicated, but it's not that bad.
But you just brought up firearms identification card versus license to carry. What is the difference?
Well, it's basically the difference between, and again, I'm not an expert, I hope I get the terms right, handguns and long guns. And if I recall, a rifle is anything with a barrel length over 18 inches long, not including the stock. So a rifle. And then the LTC is for handguns. Now, we still get people that come in and say, hey, I'd like to get an FID card so I can carry mace or pepper spray. Used to be that way. About 2 years ago, it all changed, and you no longer need an FID card for mace or pepper spray in the Commonwealth.
Right. A little bit on this FID, I still hear people say it, and I just happened to be going through my dad's things the other day. He's passed away 10 years ago, and he had an FID card. And when it was issued to him, it was issued by John Woods, former chief, a lifetime permit, or lifetime card.
He probably paid $2 for it.
I think he paid $2 for
Yeah.
it. How's that, if he was still alive, could he carry his gun with that?
Now, the law changed on that probably 25 or 30 years ago. I remember getting my first
FID.
FID card, and it was $2. It was paper. It was long and thin,
Yeah.
and you could supposedly carry it in your wallet. Those are no longer valid. We were talking about appeals, and one thing I think is very important to get out to the public before we leave the concept of appeals is a lot of times people are deemed unsuitable or not qualified because of a conviction they have, even a statutory conviction, such as assault and battery. There is a very little known judicial, I call it a judicial board, but a government organization is called the Firearms Licensing Review Board. And they can review your situation and make a recommendation to the chief to give you a permit. So there's some great information on that on a bunch of different websites. It's a little bit complicated on what they can and can't do. They cannot hear a case on assault and battery if it's a domestic assault and battery involving a family member, but they can if it's a simple assault and battery. They can't hear drug cases. They can't hear cases where you have multiple convictions unless they arise out of the same offense. But if you have that assault and battery, that one conviction that's holding you up, I would encourage anyone who's looking to get a license to at least explore the Firearms Licensing Review Board, because it may be an avenue for you to get around that hurdle that's blocking you.
And we all know, I mean, we all do stupid things in our life sometimes. And sometimes it's not even our fault, but we're president, we're going to get arrested for it or something to that effect. And the appeal board does work out for you.
Sure does. And, that's why I have the hearings. I like to hear people come in and tell their story.
So now I got my permit in town, and I'm feeling safe. And I've seen this with a lot of people. We see it on social media. I got my permit to carry. I can carry concealed. I can protect myself.
Well, that again, like anything that we deal with in licensing of firearms, is a complex question. There is no straightforward yes or no answer. And I even have to say a little bit to you, welcome to my world, because this is the decision that police officers have to make every day. What is the appropriate use of force? When can I pull my firearm? When can I not pull my firearm? When do I use my taser? When do I use my stick? Well, it's almost the same for a civilian when you have a firearm. And it's referred to as the criminal defense of self-defense. And in Massachusetts, it's pretty straightforward. You can use non-lethal force against non-lethal force. You can use lethal force when you are in fear of imminent, serious injury or death. And the key terms are there: imminent and serious, for the injury or death. You can defend yourself.
So.
But remember, fist fight, you can't pull a gun. Unless you're on the ground and you think you're going to be beaten to death.
Mm-hmm. But that's not the same as the stand your ground law we heard so much about in Florida.
The stand your ground law is, again, one of those questions that I have to give you. People ask me, does Massachusetts have the stand your ground law? Yes or no? And again, it's a complex issue. So, unless you're inside your house, that's a different, if you're in your house, that's your castle. If you're out on the street, You may use physical force in self-defense, where you're unable to escape without exposing yourself from further danger, unable to summon help, or to detain the assailant. You can use force. There's no so-called, you have to retreat, but force is the big thing. You can't use force unless those factors are present. But now you're in your house, and that's different. That's more of what we call the castle law. And I looked it up. If anybody wants to look it up, it's Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 278, Section 8A. And what it says, and this is right out of the statute, you are not required to retreat from your home or attempt to avoid combat with an unlawful intruder. You are allowed to use deadly force on an intruder if you believe you may be killed or badly injured, or the same may happen to another individual. So imminent, serious bodily harm or death to yourself or another. That's 278 8A, and that's what people commonly say is the castle law.
It's a castle law. And again, I had talked to you earlier, one of my main concerns is I see on social media, but in friends and stuff like that, they're all going out to get their permit, I call it permit, it's a license to
Right.
carry.
Yep.
Figuring they're going to protect themselves, they're going to protect their family, they're going to protect their friends, they're going to carry it wherever on their person all the time, and that's their safety factor. How much of a safety factor do you really consider it?
Well, I kind of take a unique approach to that question, because anytime you're carrying a firearm, and if you were to get in a confrontation, there is always the opportunity for that firearm to be taken away from you and used against you. Do you have an absolute right to carry it? Yes, you do. Are there some restrictions on where you carry it? Sure. Should you be carrying it onto a college campus? No.
No.
Should you be carrying it into a federal building? Most federal buildings are prohibited. And when you think about it, a post office is a federal
A
building.
building.
So you really have to use common sense and know where you can and cannot carry it. But you have the right to carry it, and if, again, going back to use of force, if somebody attacks you and you're in danger of being seriously injured, could you pull it out and use it? That's a decision you have to make. But just remember, just like with police officers, every decision is subject to review. That decision will be reviewed by other independent people, and you want to make sure you're on solid ground.
So, definitely. You brought up colleges. Leicester does have a college.
Correct.
Worcester has a bunch of colleges. Is it against the law to carry on a college?
I believe it is. My last recollection of it is, I believe it is illegal to carry on a college campus. But that would have to come with my standard disclaimer. I would have to double check and look it up. As we said, the law is constantly changing. When I first got on, we never carried on college campuses. We never carried into federal buildings. And there was even a clause in there about houses of worship. I'm just not sure how far that's evolved.
No.
But I can tell you the common sense rule is, don't carry it on. Unless, police officers can, obviously, local police, I can carry mine onto the campus here, state police can, the college police can, but other than that, I would steer clear of it.
Along with carrying, use federal buildings, colleges, schools, we have the right to open carry, but outside of federal buildings, municipal, that type of stuff, how about a bar? I'm going to stop for a beer on my way home from Hunt.
I'll be very upfront about that. If you have a license to carry for any lawful purpose, and you're stopping to have a beer on the way home, and there is a statute about a criminal statute about carrying a firearm while intoxicated, that, if you blow over the limit, just like drunk driving, you could be charged criminally with carrying that firearm. Okay, you go and you have one beer. You're not intoxicated. I have a problem with that as a licensing authority. I don't consider carrying your firearm into a bar room as good common sense under the suitability prong.
Okay.
So I'd have to take a hard look at it. And there is a case that came right out of Marlborough a few years ago where they tried to say it was illegal possession of a firearm, and the court said no under the statutory prong. So you're getting into a gray area. My feeling is common sense rule prevails. Do you really need to have a gun in a bar room?
Well, The reason I bring that up is that some people will be coming back from a hunt or shoot somewhere. They're not going to leave their weapon in the car. Maybe they shouldn't be stopping at the bar to start with, but you're not going to leave your weapon in the car. The other one is, I walk into Walmart with my pistol strapped to my side. I'm going to buy ammunition or whatever. I'm stopping to buy bread on the way home. Is that legal?
Yes, it is. And that, believe it or not, that scenario just came up about a week ago. One of our officers had to respond, and it was a gentleman who was carrying a firearm, and it made the people in the store very nervous. And we got a couple of calls on it. They went up, they spoke to him. He indicated that he was properly licensed. It turned out he was. Again, the common sense rule has to prevail. If I'm going somewhere and I have my weapon on me, I have an oversized shirt I put on. I cover it up. You have to remember that having a license to carry gives you the lawful right to carry that firearm into the store. It does not give you the right to cause panic or disturb the peace of others. So, while you may be properly licensed, you could be violating other statutes if you cause what happened up there really, a disturbance.
Yes. I mean, I would say, obviously, you wouldn't want to walk into a Walmart or your local coffee shop with an AR-15 strapped to your back.
Yeah, a true open carry state that we see these people running around with the AR-15 slung across them. I just don't see that occurring in the Commonwealth. Where generally the states are not quite as densely populated as we are.
Okay, when we get into, I got my permit now from you, and I'm going to go to Connecticut, or I'm going to travel down to Tennessee. Do we have reciprocating states?
That's always kind of a hot button issue. Massachusetts does not have reciprocity with any other states and does not recognize any other state licenses to carry, so they don't go in either direction. Now, there are states out there that do recognize Massachusetts license to carries. There are a number of them. I won't go and list them because before you go to a state, I want you to call and make sure, because the law is constantly changing, and you should check with each state before you go whether they're going to recognize your Massachusetts license. But if you're coming in from another state, they do not recognize any other permit other than a Massachusetts license to carry under the reciprocity agreement. That doesn't mean that if you're going to hunting, a sporting event or anything like you're permitted to carry through the state under the national regulations and things like that. Very complex, we won't get into that, but you need a Massachusetts permit.
So, I live in Vermont, I'm going to go to Connecticut, I'm going to have to drive through Massachusetts. How would that happen? I have to get a permit? Do I have to notify somebody first, or I just can't do it?
I'd have to defer on that and look up the federal statute. I know there are some exceptions to the interstate transportation of firearms, as I said, for NRA-sponsored events and different things like that. I don't know about just a simple carry through a state.
Right.
I'd have to.
The reason I ask is because of this traveler's guide I got, and I don't know how accurate it is, I'm assuming it should be somewhat close. Reading through it, different states do say you can carry through, providing you don't make any stops whatsoever.
Right.
And it has to be locked up in a secure container.
In the trunk.
In the trunk of your car.
Yes.
But again, that's why we did say laws change all the time. Check the states you're going to be traveling through, check the states you're going to.
So, right. Every year in my career, I've gotten calls from some other state. I've even gotten them from other countries. And they'll say, we have so-and-so at the airport and he has ammunition in his bag that he says he forgot. It happens. But you want to be especially coming through customs in another country with ammunition. So you hit the nail on the head. Make sure you check.
Yeah. I laugh, and it's not a laughing matter in today's society. But when you hear of somebody, I'm going to say in the Brookfields, or in the western part of the state, their 17-year-old goes to school on a Monday morning with his jacket on, and he happens to have a bullet in it because he's been hunting on a Friday or a Saturday. And yet, we shut down the whole school system.
Yeah.
It's a lockdown situation. And technically, he's allowed to have it, but
Yeah. It's a different world now that we live in. And, you know, we start talking about, you know, security of our schools, and, you know, we just saw another school shooting out at UCLA. You know, that's serious business. And we just have to be extra cautious in what we do. And obviously, common sense also has to be part of the formula, because accidents do happen. And when I say accidents, could that child have that bullet in there? Yes. You know, next thing you know, we see that the kid's getting carted out in handcuffs and ended up in the court. Is that the appropriate forum for that to be resolved in common sense?
common sense. And the other thing is, I hear it all the time. We talked about at coffee shops or running gun. Why don't we have a federal permit that lets us all carry?
Well, I'm going to have to defer back to you on that, because I think you've already answered it. Every state has different interests in sportsmanship, in firearms, in Second Amendment rights, transportation of firearms, and you just can't get them all on the same page. You know, we have federal permits when it comes to the regulation of manufacturing of firearms, but even that is getting fractured now with what can you ship to Massachusetts as on the Attorney General's approved sale list to be sold in Massachusetts. And then, you know, you get the one big thing that's associated with this.
Money.
Money. And let's talk about money.
Yeah.
You come into the Leicester Police Department, you hand me you hand Sergeant Tebow a piece of paper. You have to, unless you're over 70, you have to plunk down $100 for your permit. Now, everybody says, gee, you're making some good money on that, Chief. Of that $100, only 25 of it stays with the Leicester Police Department. For that, I have to do all the paperwork. I have to have an officer come in and enter your stuff enter your paperwork into the system, take your fingerprints. We have to do the background check, create a file on you, all that. I'm not making any money on these.
No, actually, I don't know what your going rate is. I'm going to say about $35 an hour for a police officer.
Right.
And you're keeping 25, and he's there at least an hour just doing the basic processing.
So we're not making any money on it. But a few years ago, there was a push, probably 15 years ago, and said, why don't they go over to a state agency to do? And I was not a police chief at the time, and I had been brought to the meeting to listen in on it. And a number of the chiefs said, that's fine with us. And then I think the state took another look at it, and they said, no one knows the applicants like the local police do.
Absolutely.
And I really believe that that's where it lies, and it should lie, even if we're losing money on it, because we know the people of our community better than anyone, hopefully, and we can make an informed, common sense decision on it.
And that made sense, especially, I mean, you've been around town for quite a while now. Jeff Tebow grew up in town. He's been a police officer 20, 25 years, somewhere in there. He knows everybody in town, basically. And to make a decision, I want somebody that knows us.
Sure. And there are many times that he'll come in and say to me, you know, this individual has this on their record. And I'll say to him, Jeff, what do you think? Give me your honest opinion. And he does. You know, he's a born and raised here, you know.
Yep.
You can't get any better information than that.
And another one that's always bothered me, and I see it on Facebook, I see it after every shooting, every arrest, is assault weapons. And I'll say to myself, and I'm probably one of the ones that post a lot of time, assault weapon. It's not an automatic. It's a gun that's made to look like a military weapon, but yet it's still a semi-automatic, no different than my hunting rifle with a different stock.
Right. And basically, when we'll get into the technical definition of it, but you know, if you discuss a rifle that's got a magazine that holds 5 rounds in it, technically, you pull it and you continue to pull it, it's semi-automatic, and it would fit the statute. We'd have to delve into it a little bit more, but it initially fits the framework. But I, like you, see it all the time. We arrest somebody, they're carrying an AR-15, it's got a 30-round magazine, or the guy's got a 100-round drum magazine. And we'll put it up on Facebook when we make the arrest. I believe in the public's right to know what's going on, and say this assault weapon was confiscated. And next thing you know, the comments start. It's not an assault weapon. It can't fire fully automatic. It's pretty simple, and I even looked it up. Assault weapon shall have the same meaning as a semi-automatic, as defined in the Federal Public Safety, and it specifically cites a number of firearms as assault weapons because they're semi-automatic assault weapons. The Kalashnikov, the AK as we call it, Colt AR-15, that's one of the most popular ones we see. You pull the trigger, a round comes out, you pull it again, and one comes out. You don't have to reload the round or anything like that. Right here under the federal statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 291, it's an assault weapon.
Assault weapon. Doesn't matter what it looks like,
Right.
as long as it has the name to it, it's an assault weapon.
And there's a whole, I can show you the whole statute. There's exemptions, there's this and that, but the bottom line is, it's an assault weapon.
Oh, it's been interesting, the different laws that we assume, and different ways we think about carrying guns. We read about, I'm going to think Washington State or Colorado, where they do sling the AR-15 over their shoulders, what have you. Or we have the simple guy that might have has the right to carry, watching the Walmart, but he starts a fiasco just because somebody happens to see it.
And the thing we always have to remember about those, Lucky, is it's not even so much what occurs when he walks in. He gets the crowd ramped up, and now maybe he gets scared, and he thinks the crowd's going to turn on him. Now you've got the Leicester Police Department rolling up. We're armed. We're going to call man with a gun at Walmart. Goes out over the scanner. State police might be rolling us a couple of units. And somebody panics. And hopefully it's not the guy that's open carrying, and he reaches down and says, look, it's unloaded, and he pulls it out of the holster. Then what do we have?
That's true.
A tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, carrying, we've talked about open carry, concealed carry. What about in your vehicle itself?
That's another one we run into quite frequently. Handgun, loaded in your car, has to be on your person or under your direct control. No doubt about it. And I'll give you my own personal opinion about it. If you've got a handgun and you've got it laying on the seat next to you, not in a holster, and you think that's under your direct control, yes it is. Is that a safe thing to do? Wait until the first time you have to make a quick stop and that gun goes flying off the seat into the dashboard. Common sense. Okay? But it has to be under your direct control or on your person. These are all under Chapter 140, Section 131. Long gun, unloaded, locked in your trunk, or locked in a case. Pretty straightforward. There's a number of different exemptions or ways you can do it, but it's got to be locked.
Gotta be locked.
And let's talk about the home.
Yeah, home's a good one.
And we got a couple of photos we'll put up on the screen here. I've got one of a gun that's locked. I've got one of a locking device, and I've actually got one of the front of one of our vaults at the police station, because yes, we are not exempt. We have to lock up our spare firearms, and we have a couple of guns that come in and out of the cruisers, and we have to keep them in a vault. So you have to have a trigger locking device. It should be unloaded, trigger locking device, or in a safe. Very simple. Get one of these devices on it. They're relatively inexpensive. We give them away during the gun buyback program that we participate in every December. If you really can't afford one and you have a gun and you need it, come and see me. I'll get you one. But it's got to be secure.
Okay, secure. And Joe down the street has his great-granddad's gun cabinet. Glass front, a little deer etched on it, what have you. The door locks on it. He has his guns in there. Is that considered secure?
I do not consider it secure. And one of the primary reasons for the securing your weapons, in my opinion, is A, to protect accidental discharges or tragedies, particularly with children.
Okay.
And where do a lot of stolen guns come from? House breaks. That glass is not going to stop somebody who's doing a house break from getting those guns. Guns are almost like a universal currency out on the street. You can get rid of them so fast and get hundreds of dollars for them.
Yeah, actually, I was just reading the article the other day from the Armory break-in. They still haven't recovered one of the, I forgot what brand it was, but it was model 1911.
I personally worked on a gun store robbery many, many years ago when I worked in another department, and I believe, if I recall correctly, there were 26 firearms stolen in that break, and when I left, there were still 5 or 6 that were outstanding.
Outstanding. And the last thing I really have, Chief, is primitive firearms. You and I had discussed this. I kind of laugh at the law in one respect, only because I have what they consider a primitive firearm that takes modern-day shells.
And the term primitive firearm is a kind of an interesting term. It's used in the federal statute, but it's not used in the Massachusetts statute. And that the statute on primitive firearms is Chapter 140, Section 121. And I know you and I have had some conversation about this, and it would be a heck of a lot easier if they made the statute a little bit clearer.
Yes.
You know, but a primitive firearm is anything that is manufactured prior to 1899. That's pretty clear cut. But then they start talking about firearms, replicas that use rimfire ammunition, and whether those qualify. If it's before 1899, I'm going to consider it a primitive firearm, and then if it's got anything that I think is questionable, I'm going to have to send it out to an expert to make that determination.
But it is strange, like I said, because we both talked about it. We thought primitive, I was thinking primitive firearm in my mind is flintlock or black powder we load from the muzzle, but it's not necessarily that.
Yeah, there's always exemptions, and they even get into, on the statute that regulates it, they start talking about centerfire ammunition that's no longer available in the United States but can be imported, and I'm sitting there, I'm reading the statute, I'm going, I need a lawyer to interpret this.
Now, a little earlier, we were talking about the processing permit, and one of the reasons I had brought this up is a friend of mine who I grew up with never had any interest in guns whatsoever. All of a sudden, he decides he needs to carry for personal protection. I stopped by his house for a coffee. He had just bought himself a nice little handgun. He had no idea how to load it, no idea how to clean it, and he's never shot it. In your class, you're teaching the law for a person to have a permit. Shouldn't there be, or in your opinion, should it be a practical exam that goes along with these?
That was actually the topic of a very, very heated and intense debate when they modified the law. If I recall correctly, it would have been a year ago in January. And that's when they switched over to suitability on FID cards, and a number of major changes were made in the law. And there was a great deal of debate as to whether a true firearm safety course should or should not include actual firing of a firearm. And I believe when Sergeant Tebow does the course here, he unloads and loads magazines. And he goes over that with them. But he's not actually loading up firearms in the building. He'll show them how the magazines come in and out, empty magazines and things like that. But they do not go out onto the range. They do not put a live round in the chamber. My position on that is, I think if you are serious about your gun ownership, that is something that you would take on and get no matter what. It would put our class out of business, because I am not capable of bringing the 15 people that take, or 20 people that take that class up to the firing range. I'd have to bring in additional instructors to keep, eye on everybody, keep safety on. And I can tell you that town's insurance company, when I call up and tell them I'm doing that, they're going to tell me flat out right, no, or they're going to go up on our rates. So it's a delicate balance. Some of the private organizations that do firearms training, the firearms safety course, then allow you to pay, call it an upcharge, or include it in a higher fee, or however they do it, and you can do some live firing at those facilities. But right now the law says that the basic handgun home safety course is all that's required.
All that's required. Well, you've answered about every question I've had, Chief, but what else do you have that you might find relevant to put out right now?
A lot of times we get calls, or people post on social media, and it came up again this week. We arrested a guy for a road rage incident, and he allegedly pointed a loaded handgun at another individual. And the scenario was, guy pulled up on his lawn, guy walked over to see what was going on, guy pulls out a gun and points it at him. So he gets arrested, we post an item on Facebook, and the comments made, well, you don't say that he had a license to carry, well, you know, like we're trying to cover something up. Once again, it's the law. I am prohibited by state law of disclosing who has a license to carry. Think about it. Somebody could come in, hand me a public records request. I want to know everybody in Leicester who has a gun permit. I give it to them, then your house gets broken into. So it's exemption J under the Massachusetts Public Records Law. I think it's chapter 6, section 70. I'm not 100% sure on that. But it says the names and addresses of persons contained in or applications in any license to carry or possession of firearms pursuant to chapter 140 are exempt from public disclosure. It's not like we're covering things up. I can't tell them.
Well, actually, Artie and I were talking about this last night. He had talked to one of your fellow officers, and the officer was referring to how much laws have changed, that they've taken stuff away from you you can't do anymore, which makes the job even harder.
It's a different world, you know. People are calling up, you know, asking questions, you know. They want information on sex offenders. We can give them that. They want information. Has my, you know, I've got a guy that's living down the street from me. He's acting crazy. Can you tell me what he's been arrested for? Absolutely can. It's the Corey statute, criminal offender record information. People calling up, hey, can you run this license plate for me? Absolutely cannot. It's the State Registry Privacy Act, the Federal Registry Privacy Act. It's a crime. There are criminal penalties for it.
I mean, and these are things you could have done years ago.
Years ago, yeah, they were still somewhat restrictive, but they weren't restrictive like they were now.
Yeah. I mean, you guys, I mean, we did have a recent tragedy, but you guys in general, it's just a tough job all the way around. You don't know what you're up against anymore.
It is, but, you know, I had the opportunity to speak at the Selectmen's meeting the other night just to thank people. We had a rough couple of weeks leading up to this. I am so fortunate that I have the caliber of people working at the Leicester Police Department that I do. And it's nice to get up here and it's nice to talk to you about firearms licensing and all of that. I couldn't do that if I didn't have great people out working the street or the dispatch center or keeping the records straight. I've got tremendous people working in that building, and for that, I'm grateful.
I've always found, for the most part, Leicester Police Department is very professional, and yeah, I've had my run-ins for different little reasons, speedings and stuff like that, but they're right, I'm wrong. You have to look at it, they're doing a job.
You know, that's right, and the job is getting much more difficult. You know, we're not perfect, and I understand that. Are police officers out there making mistakes? Yes, they are. You know what? I have a building down there with great people in it, and they're doing the right thing. And I just can't thank them enough.
Absolutely, the whole town should thank them. Actually, the whole state should be thanking them.
And, you know, and it comes down to it's not just the police. The fire department does a great job. EMS does a great job, you know, and we get great public support. So for that, I thank you.
Well, I kind of take that as a compliment too. I did 33 years on the fire department and ambulance, but I'd match any one of our professional forces against any town around, because every one of them, people just don't realize how lucky they are in this town for what we have.
I have to agree with you, and you know, kind of maybe I'm looking through rose-colored glasses as the chief of the police department, but we're very, very fortunate of the quality I think that we get from our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs.
Yes.
And you know something? Every other office, you know, I'm in the town hall every day, and you know, everybody up there works hard, and they're trying to do the right thing for the town, and what more can you ask for?
Well, I want to thank you, Chief, for coming on with me, because I do know you do your own police beat thing, but this one was kind of close to me after that incident with my friend that didn't even know how to load his own gun.
Right. And I think one thing we have to do, Lucky,
Yeah.
because this was such a difficult topic, is we have to give our standard disclaimer. The information we gave you is the best information available at this time, but if you have a question or a concern, pick up the phone and call us. Call me, I'll look it up. If you have a serious question about a licensing issue, call an attorney. We're not attorneys, this isn't legal advice.
Right. And I'd ask you to give the number, but I know you don't have it available, but there is other methods, but that judiciary system you talked about that you can go to.
Massachusetts Firearm Licensing Review Board, you can Google them. The Gun Owners Action League, located right over in Northborough. They're a tremendous organization. And what I really like about Goal is they're very, very open. And there's a great topic for another show is firearm suppressors. There's a law coming up about those. And they actually called us up and said, come on over, we're going to put on a demonstration and show you what we would like to see legalized. So you got the Gun Owners Action League, you got the National Rifle Association. There are a number of other organizations out there that assist people with their licenses. And you can always call us. You know, we're not anti-gun, we're not pro-gun. We're the guys down the middle that have to make the decisions.
Well, I want to thank everybody tonight for watching me, and Jim tonight. This is a little bit of Leicester. Lucky Margadonne and Jim Hurley saying good night.